Hello, my name is Debbie Boone, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, The Bend, where we explore how successful people navigated the path and emerged in a better place when life threw them an unexpected twist. It's inspired by one of my favorite sayings: the bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. These conversations will hopefully help you and inspire you to embrace your personal bend and to flourish. I hope you enjoy it, and if you need help with your own personal navigation and you're in veterinary medicine, please feel free to reach out to me at Debbie Boone to Manage Vets Consulting. Enjoy the bend and be inspired by our wonderful guest. Welcome. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Bend. My name is Debbie Boone, and this is the podcast where we shine a light on innovators, disruptors, and change makers who are bending the veterinary profession to the better. I am a speaker, trainer, and champion of veterinary teams. And on The Bend, we work to shine light on some people who are making dramatic changes to our world, helping our lives be a little bit better. And today I am happy to say that I'm going to bring to you David Servodidio. Did I do it right, David?
Yeah. Yes, you did, Debbie.
There's a lot of D's and I's in that last name, but anyway. But he is the CEO and co-founder of Vet Verify. And Vet Verify is a company that I've been kind of watching for a while. As someone who used to work the front desk, the minute I spoke to Connor, who was also a member of the Vet Verify team, and he told me about this, I went, oh my gosh, I would have loved this when I was a CSR, because I can't even begin to tell you how many times we answered the phone and we're giving vaccine history over the phone, or there was a last minute desperation call from an owner going, I've got to go out of town and my dog is overdue and I need to get him in for a vaccine. So, let's talk a little bit about you and Vet Verify and take it from there, David.
Let's do it. Thanks for having us. Excited to be here.
So you're a startup guy, right? A tech startup guy. Is this the first startup you've done, or is this are you a chain startup guy?
Oh goodness. I this is not the first startup I've been involved with.
Okay.
This is the first one where I'm one of three co-founders and partners that sort of have seen it through all the way from, my gosh, at some point this was just a conversation over a couple of beers, and then it ended up on a whiteboard, and then it ended up with a prototype, and to where we are today. So this is the first
Okay.
time I've been involved since that early, gosh, what if we built this thing type
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
But no, I'm a startup guy. I have a background in venture capital, and working with all kinds of different companies
Hmm.
from gosh, there was one point in time where I was working on a project helping Kenny Chesney start a rum company. So everything from that to now I find myself talking about Bordetella and rabies pretty often. So it's been a fun
Well,
journey.
I guess if you are an interested in entrepreneurship, that business is business, and there's the rules of the game, and no matter what.
That's right.
But I am curious as to, after rum, how do you get to vet med? Because I'd have
Here's
stayed in
the
the rum, to tell you the truth.
here's the common thread throughout my journey is I'm very attracted towards working with incredible people, incredible teams, and just solving really big problems. Right before Vet Verify, I was working for another startup, a successful one, out of Nashville, Tennessee, in the human healthcare compliance space. And again, just solving these, like working with everyday folks and realizing, my gosh, there are just there are bottlenecks in somebody's everyday world. How do we just solve what is can be a really almost really simple problem to solve, but the solution is rather complex and certainly involves data.
Mhm.
And that those are the types of companies and problems I'm attracted to. And so the common theme is just really good folks, really good people. I think it's as I get older, it becomes less about what problem are you solving and more about who do you get to solve that problem with.
Yep.
And so that's been the common thread throughout
Yeah.
my career.
Yeah. Life is too short to work with jerks. So I'm with
No
you.
doubt.
I am with you. So let's talk a little bit about the Vet Verify idea and how did that get started, I think one of the challenges, and I talk to a lot of tech people, is integration with all the PIMs out there. And
Hmm.
as a consultant, I'm in these PIMs all the time. They don't even call things the same thing, as
That's
you're
right.
going into looking at your reporting and stuff. So there's so much mapping that has to be done to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
Tell me how, kind of how you figured out how to do this.
Oh my goodness. How much time do we have on this podcast? No,
Well, we can
I'll
make
keep
time.
it I'll keep it short. I'll back up for a second. The problem that we solve at Vet Verify is, again, it's a really simple one to describe. Solving it in the actual thing that we built and our approach to solving the problem, the unique way that we do, is the complexity involved. But the problem is simple. People they've got pets, they love them, they are moving around the world with those pets.
Mhm.
And every time they go somewhere that's not a vet clinic, or not, I should say, not their vet clinic, there's a typical this moment of verification required. Hey, can you show me that your dog is up to date on the required vaccinations? And without any B2B tools in the process, the pet owner is sort of caught in this moment of friction.
Yep.
Saying, I'm chasing these things around. It's exactly what you just described. I'm calling the front desk of the vet clinic. Are we after hours? My flight leaves in 2 hours. It's all of the above.
Yes.
And so we approach this problem through the lens of pet owner friction. This is a pet owner centered problem. This is
Mhm.
to make the world more accessible to us and the pets that we love. It requires some version of openness and access.
Mhm.
Our approach to solving this problem comes from our unique. This is where the founder story comes in. Is our background, our founding team, the last thing we were all doing is working on large data problems and building verification pipelines for other industries. So think like employment and income verification. At one point in time, if you wanted to buy a car on the weekend, you couldn't because no one could verify your income without calling your employer. If your employer was closed, you had to wait till Monday to buy a car. Now you can go into a car dealership, buy a car on the weekend because that process is automated with infrastructure behind the scenes.
Unless the internet goes down, which is what happened to
That's the
me when I
internet.
went to go and buy the car. That exact same thing happened to me when I
No
was buying the
doubt.
car. Yep. I was
No
like, oh,
doubt.
sorry, we have to do this old school because the
That's right.
internet's
The
down.
internet's down. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
And so we took that approach to veterinary medicine, and we said what we don't think the everyone needs is another piece of software that there's another workflow, there's another set of buttons, there's another place to log in. What we envisioned was something a little bit more foundational, which is I think there's this level of connected infrastructure that if it's like I would describe us as like plumbing for a city, right? Like if every homeowner had to build their own house and figure out how to get water and electricity out of the house, it'd be chaos.
Hmm.
And to some degree, that's our point of view when we look at veterinary medicine. It's like we look at these practices and we're saying without some basic infrastructure, they're trying to get their own plumbing by hiring people or piecing together a workflow or having rules that are a sticky note to the front desk. What and fill in the blank. So our point of view was how do we bring some infrastructure into veterinary medicine?
Hmm.
The piece you asked about the integrations, my goodness, what a new world that we were exposed to. I'm proud to say today, 4 years later, I have a lot more gray hair than I once did, and we have figured out how to integrate or be compatible with basically any piece of software that
Good.
the veterinary community uses, whether that's their PIMS or their client communications tool. Even if they are paper-based, we figured out a way to actually support this. And so we were hit with all of that, and it took us it we absolutely fell into this was twice as expensive and took twice as long than we would have ever guessed to figure out.
Well,
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that happens a lot in vet med, and having been doing this since 1985, I can tell you that it is all over the place, and it still surprises me. I was kind of one of those early adapter managers where we had a website early in the 90s that URL is still active to this day,
Oh my
probably
goodness.
one of the oldest veterinary URLs out there. But we don't like to change things.
Yep.
and we're comfortable where we are. Plus, we're really busy. And so, as you know, change takes time and
Hmm.
effort, and it's an effort we don't necessarily have that we want
Yep.
to make the effort to do. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
Until there is that great pain. If
Hmm.
there's great pain, then okay, we'll manage it.
That's right.
So I am still surprised at how many paper charts there are still floating around in this world.
Oh yeah.
Um, and just thinking, oh my gosh, because again, that was something back in early 90s. We computerized our practice and then constantly chasing paper charts. Our two of our doctors were over 6'5", and they always stuck things on top of a bank of cages. And so the first thing we started
Yeah.
to do was look for charts way up here where
Yeah.
most
We
people
need a
would look
ladder
on the
just to even
counter.
get the medical records.
That's exactly right. So I really like the idea of this integration because I think that the point that you make is it's not just just calling up and getting records or that kind of stuff. Now, people are really moving with their animals all
Yeah.
over the country, all over the world, and to the point where I've started coaching people to ask, has your animal traveled outside of your geography?
Hmm.
Because when we're taking medical history, we might have a mystery ailment in front of us that doesn't happen in our world.
Yeah.
And it's just not on our radar. So
Yeah.
I really feel like, having this flexibility to see all the places that this animal has the ecosystem of the pet, so to speak.
Hmm.
Is has it been to the groomer? Has it been to the boarding facility? Did take it to Kansas City with you when you went? And did
Yeah.
it check into an emergency hospital out there? So how do we know all those things, and how do we have really complete history? And it's always been a challenge in vet med because unlike human health, we're just siloed into our own little world. So you've kind of broken the silos open.
Oh yeah, not without the bumps along the way, but no
Hmm.
doubt it is the I would say the moat around vet med. We're one of the if I think about grooming or if I think about boarding and daycare, I can personally attest that we are the only company that is showing up in both places, right? That
Yeah,
always was stunning to me.
yeah,
These
yeah.
are the same pets, and they may be going across the street.
Hmm.
Matter of fact, they may actually be spending more money on grooming and boarding and
Hmm.
daycare than they are at the vet.
Hmm.
But yet there are no connective tissue to
Hmm.
inform each other.
Hmm.
And I think what really stuck out is we started to process thousands and thousands of verifications.
Hmm.
There's so many truths that I think are naturally disruptive in what we've come to believe that are really we're probably the first people to ever say these things to the veterinary industry. And one of those is there's really no correlation that we can see between when folks their pets' vaccines are expiring and they're booking an appointment at the vet, but there's an extremely high correlation between when somebody has an upcoming reservation at boarding,
Hmm.
they require rabies, bordetella, distemper, and canine influenza, and within 14 days, that person is back at the vet
Hmm.
to make sure their life isn't disrupted. And that care coordination moment, I would say, is really in the entirety of what our business is all about.
Hmm.
We see this world of bringing the pet care economy together means coordinating care really smartly,
Hmm.
ultimately benefiting the pet owner. But the reality is, if the vet clinic doesn't win, the pet owner doesn't win. Is
Right.
sort of the truth that we've also come to understand is
Hmm.
the veterinary industry provides the care. Now, how do we do that in a seamless way
Hmm.
so that it's a win-win-win for everybody? And those moments in time are really helping people cross the moat into
Right.
vet med at the moments where they really critically need care,
Yeah.
or else their life as a pet owner is disrupted in some way.
Right. Well, you create a sense of urgency there that
Hmm.
says, okay, you can't board here unless you have these vaccines due, and so the urgency comes. But let's not make it to the point of urgency where you can't do anything about it as the pet
That's
owner.
right.
You're
That's
stuck,
right.
right? You're just stuck.
That's
So if
right.
there's information early enough, and I think the other part of this is as manager of a hospital, we send out a lot of reminders, and
Yes.
I think a lot of practices don't do the cadence that we send out. And because of that, we had like an 87% compliance on preventative care, which was unheard of at that time and is still pretty dang rare even at this
Yeah,
time. And so the question comes is like, how often are these people actually getting reminders? And studies have been done. People don't mind getting as many as five or six because life is busy and
that's
things get
right.
pushed down. The email thread gets pushed down, the notification on text message gets deleted or pushed away. And if we're not doing a frequency that says, excuse me, your pet needs
That's
this,
right. That's
then
right.
it's just going to drop by the wayside. So you guys tell us a little bit about, kind of how it works and how it's
Yeah.
set up between let's say the boarding kennel and the veterinary provider.
Yep, great question. So fundamentally, we are like a system to system verification infrastructure. So the really simple example, we'll use a dog daycare or pet resort, and we'll use an easy one. Let's say they're in Nashville, Tennessee. What when would The way that we work is we sync into their reservation calendar, so we understand every pet that's coming in through the front door in the next 30 days, and we understand the unique requirements of that facility all the way down to service type. Sometimes for grooming only, they may only require rabies. If it's an overnight reservation, they may require a full vaccine panel. Fecal test, all those different variables. So we get hyper specific to each individual location, and then we're constantly looking out 30 days in advance to say, okay, let's make sure every upcoming appointment has a verified vaccine record on file that meets the requirements, and thus this appointment is not at risk from the pet resort's point of view. What we see is it very consistently, about 20% of that calendar at any point in time, no matter January, August, Memorial Day, at any point in time, about 20% of that calendar, something is missing or expired. And so veterinary care is required for 1 in 5 pets at any moment in time that are walking into a pet resort. And just to give your listeners context, the types of resorts that we work with, there's about 100 pets a day or more coming through the front door. So the volume of these is pretty significant. When those moments happen, those verification is required here, care is needed, then we coordinate with their vet clinic that's on file. We let the clinic know, hey, your client has an upcoming boarding reservation. Let's get them booked for care. We have really sophisticated ways of doing that with some of our partners that have native booking capabilities. And sometimes it's just a notification, right? If it's a paper-based clinic, sometimes we're just sending, hey, your client, now's a good time to call.
Mhm.
And then we're constantly re-verifying when that care gets scheduled so that we can ultimately complete the circle and make
Mhm.
sure that the pet resort has vaccine records on file, that no pet owner's care is disrupted, but that the clinic gets to know proactively, hey, my 5 clients are going to these pet resorts or these grooming salons. I have no visibility into that. But now that I know, I can make sure they're booked for the appropriate level
Mhm.
of care and avoid the whole disruption. So
Mhm.
we're in the business of what I would call sending signals back and forth.
Mhm.
Here is care that's required to the veterinary community, and then the veterinary community delivers that care, and so we send the results of that back
That, yeah,
to the resort that needs that for their own compliance reasons. That's
yeah.
generally how we work. And then from there, we start to fold in other industries. So the housing market, just to touch on this specifically for a second, we're at a really interesting time in the United States where housing, especially first-time home buyers, are having a hard time buying homes, right? The affordability, home prices have skyrocketed, all the reasons why. I'm an economics nerd, and so I pay attention to these things. And so what happens as a result is that the demand for apartment buildings and rentals is going up
Mhm.
because you have folks that perhaps 10 years ago would be in the buyer's market are now in the rental market. And thus, what we have started to see as we've dipped into the multifamily housing world is a really interesting trend in many, many cases. The apartment complex is actually the first group to know that this pet owner has a pet before they've picked a vet, before they've picked a boarding or grooming daycare. They are getting a pet and they're registering it with their apartment complex. And there's this moment of origination there which is where we start to see. And because they're now asking us to get vaccine records, but this person hasn't been to, they don't have a home GP. This happens about 10% of the time.
Wow.
So, which is fascinating. And so we watch these trends happen, and ultimately it comes down to if we can help connect the infrastructure, we can help coordinate the level of care on the veterinary side, just because we're aware of these signals that a vet clinic has, that they don't have any other tool to
Mhm.
know if somebody in their community, perhaps across the street, moved into an apartment complex that they can see out at the front desk of the clinic. They have a new pet, but there's no way to market to them, right? To get them in.
Yeah.
We're that signal passer.
That's very interesting. One thing I wanted to ask you, because some of the stuff you're talking about economics and looking at trends and vet med, one of the things that we're seeing is because of the economic challenges of our economy, uh, people are behind on routine care. And so traditionally we're seeing, 2, 3 months out. Now we're seeing 6, 8, further out, 4 to 6 months out. Are
Yes.
you kind of seeing that same trend, and are you able to um kind of with the pressure of the boarding or the grooming or whatever, you're pushing that back into the veterinary hospital?
Fantastic question. So I think there's a report that came out pretty recently that says that the visit traffic in the veterinary world is down. I think 16 quarters in a row has
Mhm.
has
It
been.
just keeps going
It
down.
just
Yeah.
keeps going down. But the prices are going up, and so
Mhm.
the revenue might tell a different story, just because of how price is compensating for lack of traffic,
Mhm.
and then routine care maintenance. What is interesting is it is those trends are reflected slightly in the pet services world, but not fully. And I would say, if anything, that makes these things even more tied together than they perhaps once were. I'll give you an example. What we see, especially in the dog daycare world or the dog boarding world, is if folks are making budget decisions on where to spend their dollars, and if they have the ability to still travel on a family vacation, or if, in many cases, dog daycare is a mechanism to still go to work. I need to go to the office 5 days a week. And so therefore, how do I take my pet to some place that's fun and enriching while that happens? Those are, and I hope I don't offend anybody, any of my veterinary friends, but I would say those are more daily sort of lifestyle decisions that impact your day to day. How do I interact through this world as a pet owner? Than perhaps staying up to date on preventative care at my veterinarian. And so what we actually see is the correlation now is even stronger between, okay, if that behavior is not stopping, but folks are starting to delay preventative care. Well, when do they have to get preventative care? And it is because they're going to boarding or they're going to daycare or they're moving into a new home,
Mhm.
apartment complex. All of a sudden, human nature is what it is. I
Yeah,
think that when we have to prove that our pets are vaccinated, it motivates us.
sure.
That motivates action. And so what we see over the last, probably we've been at this for 4 years. So ironically, the veterinary trend of 16 quarters, we entered the market at like the highest time ever
Yeah.
for patient traffic. And since then, it's been a pretty significant decline. But what's been interesting is that those 4 years, those 16 quarters, the correlation between what Vet Verify is fundamentally doing and how do we get more folks back into the vet at the moments where we know they will convert. We know this person is going to the vet, or I should say they're going to a vet. I
Mhm.
think part of what we do is make sure they continue to get preventative care at their home vet versus something else, making an alternative choice. So if anything else, Debbie, I would say it's strengthened the overlap here and the relationship, that you can't untangle it.
Yeah.
Services and veterinary medicine.
Yeah, I read an article that said dog daycare has gone up in price more than child care. So the
Oh
child
yeah,
in that same period of time did 25% and dog care has gone up 40%.
I
But yet
believe it.
people will still bring their dog to doggy daycare, and they are going to board them and they've got to have, or they've got a dog walker, or whatever it is. it's a very interesting time in vet med. And the other
Mhm.
part of this is this is a trend that's been going on for a while, is that people are choosing animals over kids because
Yes,
they're less expensive. And even with all the ancillary stuff that they will spend money on in the dog care and the pet sitters and all that, still is cheaper than kids. So
that's right.
get at it that way.
That's
Um,
right.
so just for curiosity, I mean, like thinking about the work that you're doing for the hospitals that are using Vet Verify, kind of what's the feedback that you guys are getting from those practice teams?
It's real. I'll tell you one thing. One thing that's a fun stat. I probably won't be able to say this forever. I can say it right now. We've never lost a clinic. So there's never been one clinic that has started with Vet Verify and stopped. And that's because it is truly this, it doesn't exist in any other form.
Mhm.
It's just a proactive alerting of, I'm going to scan my community once a day to see if any of my clients are around, almost like a radar.
Mhm.
And if my clients are going somewhere and veterinary care is required, it's pulling them in,
Mhm.
and that sort of radar passive adoption. And we're pretty cheap, honestly.
Mhm.
Our goal is not to be, there's a lot of stuff in the market that tries to push hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month at the veterinary practice. And our point of view is to not do that. Our
Mhm.
point of view is to say this is really simple. It should be affordable and it should be dynamic. It should just be this thing you turn on and it helps your practice and it makes immediate ROI in 30 days.
Mhm.
And so the feedback has been pretty tremendous. I think the on the flip side of that though, our biggest to this day, our biggest hurdle, our biggest obstacle has simply been language. It is, we are so novel in the way that we talk to a veterinary practice. It requires them to A, acknowledge there's a moat, and then B, recognize there's things on the other side of the moat, and then C, appreciate the fact that maybe a bridge could be helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
those
the
three things are more complicated than you think.
the bridge tenders tend to be the CSRs because they're
Yeah,
the ones who are tending the bridge.
that's
And
right.
and I think a lot of time the managers and particularly the medical team, if they've never worked the front desk, really don't understand how many calls, how much time, how upset people are when they call last minute and want to come in and you don't have any availability.
That's right.
If they
That's
didn't
right.
get a heads up about this stuff, ahead of time. Um, and even maybe if they came in and refused to have the care, but now there's urgency, right?
That's right.
And so they want to get in. So the front desk takes a lot of that, a lot of the heat.
Yes, it does.
From
And the disconnect there is what we see every day of
Mhm.
just, I would say Vet Verify, we certainly contribute to the growth of a clinic because we're helping these folks come back in.
Mhm.
But on the purely like where does phone call volume for the front desk? How does that rank in terms of a DVMs, what they're thinking about on a daily basis? Right. It is I would say that we're not number one or number two.
Mhm.
We're further down on that list. However, for a CSR or practice manager, I mean, installing Vet Verify ends up being my gosh, this is an everyday annoyance, right? And to free up that time and have the benefit to say, not only are we saving time, but we're helping these people come back because we've got our radar that just scans the community is something that we just hear that feedback pretty constantly. The hardest part of our story is convincing them to understand. It's
Yeah,
because we're just so new and different than anything
right.
they've ever seen before.
Well, when I was managing hospitals, one of our best clients owned a large boarding facility, and our hospital could board 100 animals. So
Yeah.
I kind of grew up in boarding. We had two full-time groomers and five full-time doctors, and then three other practices. So there was a lot of stuff going on in that practice.
Yeah, no doubt.
But the boarding facility was where we would send all of our overflow. But
Yep.
converse to that, if there were unattached owners, Melanie
Yep.
would send them to us for veterinary care. So I would
Yep.
have to think that if I was a practice and I was collaborating with a boarding facility with Vet Verify, that if they had unattached owners
Yes.
that needed veterinary care, that they would say, well, go to this one because we automatically get updates
That's
about your vaccine.
exactly right. That's exactly right. What you just described is our exact process. We just
Mhm.
have a system for it. Now you can buy that
Yeah.
without having the explicit relationship,
Yeah.
right? Is just like you can actually just buy this thing that
Mhm.
is doing this for you on a daily basis
Mhm.
in the background. But I'm thrilled to hear that because what you just described is the way that we describe it to the average practice. Like
Mhm.
instead of knowing Melanie and having this sort of on paper agreement or handshake agreement that
Yeah.
Melanie's going to refer you pets. It's just a tool that does it automatically in the
Mhm.
background.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, so I'm curious, is like this is, you know, being an entrepreneur is not for the weak of heart. Um, Tell me about, were there failures? Were there backsets? Were there times when you went, oh, we should probably just throw in the towel and
Oh my goodness,
think
what
about
day do
something
you want me to
else?
pick? Yeah. The of course, I would say our Vet Verify, we failed far more than we've succeeded. And I think that that is ultimately, if you're on the startup path, you have to be embrace that as like, my gosh, if you're not, matter of fact, we have a full company meeting every Friday. And in that meeting, it is all one of the standing agenda topics is what did we fail at this week? So we can learn from it. Like what didn't go well?
Mhm.
Was there a bug in our code? Was there a, my gosh, we really botched this meeting with this person, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
But embracing failure, I think, is part of the journey. Our failures at Vet Verify are, we stepped in a lot of landmines early on that of just like the PIMS world. And I think that we were viewed for the first probably year of our existence. I think our co-founders, particularly the three of us, myself, Tim Ridgway, and Chris Lynn, were viewed as, we can't tell if these are good guys or bad guys.
Right.
Like in when you bring data folks into the veterinary medicine, I
Yeah.
think there's this like evaluation period
Right.
of like, are these folks good guys? Are they
Yeah.
bad
Do we
guys? Are
trust
they
you or are you just trying to steal our
That's
client
right.
base, right?
I think it took us a full year
Hmm.
of just telling the same story constantly,
Hmm.
being really upfront around what we do, how it works. It's not nefarious, but you get into this integration can be this bad word sometimes
Hmm.
in veterinary medicine. And so I think it took us failing constantly at how to describe what we do in a way. I mean, we have actually introduced with some of these PIMS companies ways to integrate that have never existed before because what we want to protect is veterinary medicine. They own their data.
Hmm.
And so they should be incredibly protective of what leaves. And there are PIMs out there that you try to integrate with, and they just give you blanket access to anything that exists in the system. And we were a company that took a very hard stance early on to our own detriment that said, if you can't support an endpoint secure level of integration, well, you're not ready for Vet Verify
Hmm.
because we would get access to things that we have no business accessing,
Right.
right? And I think we had to stand up and do that for a really long time. So our failures are more in how do we position this in a way that the veterinary community can understand and frankly just to stick around long enough so that the community sees that we're not the bad guys.
Yeah.
We're actually attempting to be the good guys.
Yeah. I think you made a point here that I think a lot of veterinary practices are particularly naive. Now, probably some of the big corporate ones get it, and certainly big ones like Banfield.
Mhm.
The data matters, and the
Yes.
data is valuable. And there are people out there who integrate with us who will take that information and sell it to
Yep.
other people. And if you're thinking about, okay, well, I'm gonna connect with a boarding facility and here's my patient information. I don't want that boarding facility to be able to get into my PIMS and pull
That's
data.
right.
And there has to be a wall, right? There has to be the safety net. And
Yep.
and I feel like a lot of times veterinarians are like, this is really a good idea. I think I'll do this. Not Vet Verify, but some of the other tools that are out there. And they basically just open up the gate for anybody to walk in and pull any kind
Yes.
of information. And
Yep.
it's a little scary. It's a little, it kind of really angers me because I realize that they should, if they wanted to give away this information, they should be able to sell it and say,
Yes.
this is valuable and you need to pay me for it. If you want this information, guess what? That's
That's
fine,
right.
but you pay me
That's
for
right.
it. But that
Yeah.
doesn't happen. Yeah, that does.
Yeah. It's interesting to position in many ways. We Vet Verify is we exist as that wall. That's really our business is to say you don't have a wall right now, but we can be that for you.
Mhm.
That is if you want a wall here and you want to make sure you gate access and understand exactly which companies are accessing which of your clients' records at any moment in time.
Mhm.
We are the first tool to be able to manage that and track that for you. And so in many ways, we are tracking something that's never been tracked before. And that in and of itself, when you open that box, it is, oh my gosh, now that I'm really thinking about
Yeah.
this, how many companies have my medical records
Yeah.
out there in the community? And that number, that answer is frighteningly a lot.
A lot.
And
Exactly.
our our whole point of view is you can secure that. You can
Mhm.
actually control that. And
Mhm.
as a veterinary practice, you should be able to, and you shouldn't be limited by what your PIMS can or can't do.
Mhm.
You should just say, all right, this is my PIMS. And I have Vet Verify, as in this case, is a wall around the PIMS. And if you need access to a medical record, we can help permission that for you. So that way you have the access you need, but we don't violate the terms of PII that are just protect our consumers. You
Mhm.
would not believe every single day we get full 140-page medical records from
Oh, yeah.
practices and with all kinds of stuff on there when all they needed was, does this dog have Bordetella? Yes,
Right.
no.
Listen,
Right.
I've seen people send charts out that have people's driver's license and social security number on it.
We've seen it. We've seen it.
Mhm.
Yeah. It is,
I'm
it
sure
is,
the client has no idea that is happening.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's
no
right.
idea that is happening.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
years ago, before there were quite as many corporates as there are at this point in time, I was interviewed and somebody asked me a question about what I thought about one of the companies was buying a lab and the integration with the lab and this other big company. And I said, well, if I was in the business of buying veterinary hospitals and I wanted to know how much potential growth there were, I think I would pull all those records from all those PIMs and I would
Yeah.
see how much possible available new business I could drive with a couple
Yeah.
of, initiatives. And I'd go and buy those practices. And the lady said, "You were the first person I've interviewed that said that." And I went, "That's the way I think, right? That is,
Yeah.
and that's the way they think too. But we're a little naive in veterinary medicine, and we just live in our own little world here. We don't think
Yeah.
big things anymore. Or well, I guess we're better. We're just at that point where we're better. Debbie Boone here. I want to take a quick break and thank you for listening to The Bend. As many of you know, I am a trainer, speaker, writer, and consultant working to make life better for the folks in the veterinary profession. If you're a practice owner or manager, you've felt it. Team burnout, difficult client conversations, and the constant pressure to do more with less. That's why I wrote Hospitality in Healthcare, the culmination of my 40 years of peopling in vet med. It gives you a clear, practical way to elevate the client experience while making work feel better for your team, not harder. If you're ready to lead a practice that feels as good as it performs, you can find the book wherever books are sold. Now, let's get back to my guest on The Bend. So, thinking about the PIMS and all these integrations, one of the things I tell people is like, be careful. You can subscribe yourself to death
No
with
doubt.
these different kind of things. Are you're just sending reminders out when there's like you're seeing sense of urgency. So you're not the routine cadence that like some of the apps are.
Correct.
You're not doing. You're just saying, okay, you want to go to the boarding kennel, you want to go to the grooming kennel. Guess what? You got to go
Correct.
first. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you a good example of like a partnership that we have. So we just today actually we announced our partnership with Ally DVM and MWI. And so they're a partner of ours. Ally DVM is what their clinics would use to send and facilitate their reminders.
Mhm.
So that we are not a reminder company.
Mhm.
I would say we're here to enrich that process by only when we see that urgent care, then we let them know through Ally DVM and help them get booked into the clinic That's their home GP, but we're not a reminder company. We don't need to be. There's a lot of those out there.
Mhm.
A lot of, and they serve a purpose, to your point. Like sometimes a pet owner needs to feel the drip
Mhm.
of of that 5 or 6 times. We're just serving up the okay. Now it's you've gotten 5 or 6, but now you really need to pay
Yeah,
attention.
it's
Right? We're
now or
that.
never, right?
That's right. We're that like seventh final notice
Yeah,
is the vet verify.
yeah. You are the do this or go to jail.
That's right. That's right.
So
That's
now,
right.
so now I'm curious because we're seeing so much AI coming into vet med, and it's like the
Yeah.
latest and greatest thing. And when I was at VMX, I swear I was accosted by receptionist AI companies wanting to talk to me. And then the PIMS scribing, that's we got 48
Yep.
scribing companies now.
Yep.
Do you think that people are going to start going, oh, well, we could do something like Vet Verify, or we could buy Vet Verify and we could integrate, are there people knocking at your door to buy you?
That has happened since the first day
Oh,
of we showed up at VMX within a couple months of starting our company years ago, 4 years ago. And we got approached with offers at that moment. And I think that now it wasn't the right time, right? For all the reasons we're constantly approached by folks that want to participate in different ways, whether that's ownership or acquisition or what does it mean? We're really sensitive and cautious around what does that mean. We have built, I'll give you an example. We have no exclusivity with anybody for anything. We have managed that. A lot of companies can't pull that off that are our size. They have to sign a deal with somebody to be exclusive to get that initial juice.
mhm,
We are building infrastructure. It's like if you want to be the city water for the municipality, right? How can you be exclusive to one type of company?
mhm,
So Mars is on our cap table. They're one of our investors. We just signed a partnership with MWI. We work with many of the other companies. We have folks that have significant backgrounds with Purina that are really good friends to Vet Verify. So we have been Switzerland in the sense that we have maintained this position of working with everybody. For the foreseeable future, that's going to continue because I think we are focused on building something that the industry needs.
mhm.
Now, I'm not naive to this. I'm an entrepreneur. At some point, there's going to be some company that recognizes what we do and can understand they can take it further than our little small team of Vet Verify can take it.
Mhm.
And I think when the moment comes where that's a good thing for the industry, then we'd embrace that conversation. But that has not come.
Was there a time out there when you were building Vet Verify or any of the companies that you built that you should have pivoted and you didn't? And then how did you kind of back up? Because I really want this to be a tutorial uh,
Mm,
for entrepreneurs and for people who are just, going through life and thinking, I need to take a chance on something. I have an idea
yeah.
and I could really make something unique or different out there in the
Yes.
world. Um, what was the pivot?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. So many. I'll give you an example. I would say this is the hallmark of being a 4-year-old startup that has made it 4 years. If you start a company and you look back and say we still exist 4 years later, you have undoubtedly pivoted at some point. Something has changed along the way. No one on the planet have I ever met that has had the same exact vision or idea, and 4 years later it played out exactly how they thought. And I think that's the hallmark if you're listening to this and you're interested, you've got your own idea or concept. The hallmark is just listening to the market. What is the market telling you and how do you pivot? And paying attention to headwinds and tailwinds. So where's the industry going? I mentioned if you rewind this back, that Verify started at the peak of veterinary traffic when
Mhm.
folks had seen a level that they had never ever seen of client traffic before. And we were saying, hey, we can help you get more clients. And the veterinary practice is saying,
That's
please
funny.
don't. Yeah, please don't. I've got too many.
Yeah.
Right. And now, 4 years later, that has flipped. And
Hmm.
so much of our pivot, I'll give you an example. When 4 years ago or 3 years ago, when we were spending a lot of time figuring out how to work with primarily the veterinary industry, they were giving us that feedback. We don't need new clients, nor do we want them, right? We are every day, our staff is showing up and they are slammed from the moment they get here to the moment they leave. We're slammed. We got waiting lists. We care is scheduled 6 months out. That was the narrative we heard. And so the pivot that we made is to say, okay, where's the pain most acutely felt now for what we do? And it wasn't on the veterinary side at that moment, but it definitely was on the services side. And I'll give you a reason why. These things they're related. And so if the veterinary clinic is slammed, they are not picking up the phone as quickly because there's everybody's calling in and care's being scheduled out, which means if a pet resort has an upcoming reservation in 3 days and that person needs a Bordetella vaccine, all of a sudden it becomes a hassle of where is that pet owner going to go? This person needs veterinary care, but they can't get in with their GP. And thus, this is a real bottleneck problem. And so we stepped in to start helping resorts coordinate care. Okay, this person needs Bordetella. How do we refer them to one of our partner clinics? And now we've sort of seen it come full circle because we were doing that. Now we're saying, okay, we can work with the veterinary as the economy and the markets evolve. Now the veterinary industry is telling us, hey, we're ready for this now.
Hmm.
We're ready for more appointments because of what's going on economically. So I think the pivot is just to understand who's feeling the pain, knowing that that can change, especially we're some version of a two-sided marketplace. So as the economy ebbs and flows, the pain can shift from one side to the other. But if you're paying really close attention to your customer and what the market is saying in terms of feedback, just trust your gut and what you're hearing. So plenty of examples like that along the way, but that's a pretty clear one is we just follow what the market says.
In every economy, there's opportunity and there's suffering. And, I think one of the reasons that so much private equity money came into vet med was during COVID, we looked like we were recession proof. I think a
Yes.
couple of things happened there. People were at home staring at their pets and going, which if they had been at work, they would have never known that that was doing that. And they would have
Yep.
just motored on with their lives. So there was that. And then we were incredibly inefficient because we weren't letting people in the building. So it was unwieldy for us to do work. And so we slowed down. But, all things change. This is my fifth economic downturn in vet med because I started in 1985. And having seen these cycles go up and down and up and down, well, there's winners and there's losers. And during like you think about natural disaster, Hurricane Helene came and wiped out a bunch of things up in the mountains of North Carolina. One of my clients
Yeah.
was affected. But let me tell you what, the construction boom is booming, and the garbage people are booming, and the
Yep.
generator people are booming, and so those things happen. So you have to find who's got the business at that point in time. And
Yep.
I think that's sort of what you're talking about here, because
Yeah.
during COVID, the other thing that happened was all those boarding providers were suffering because so they desperately needed to get any animal in that they
That's
could
right.
get in,
That's
and
right.
no barriers to getting them in because people weren't traveling and they were.
hmm That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's just if as it's part of this entrepreneurial journey, if you will, but just paying attention to that and not some you have to find the balance of staying true to saying what's the vision for this thing that I'm building, and at the same time, where's the business now?
Mhm.
And where's the market now and timing that out more than anything is just if there's one thing you can't control you can't control market timing, you just interact with it, you respond to it.
Yeah, that's it.
and
That's it. As much as
and
politicians would like to tell us that they
yeah,
bring control, they have
yeah,
no control.
that's
They
right.
really don't. It is about the market, and the market does what the market does, and
Yep.
any ups and
Yep.
downs. But I think about when I started consulting, and I think about my business card, and it talked about cornerstone expertise and operations and stuff. And now my focus is so much front desk and hospitality skills and leadership training, and really shifted completely towards communication, which is my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's funny, after 20 years of kind of beating my head against the wall, going, we should do customer service, customer service. The profession is going, oh, we might ought to do good customer service.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think? I think
Yep. That's
you're
right.
right. We probably should realize that we are in a service business. That's funny. So, out there in the world, did you have somebody who was like your role model or somebody you looked at that said, I watched them do it and maybe I can do it?
So many. Yeah, I had plenty. Folks that I've worked directly for, folks that I've worked with. Some of my best friends, my college roommates are both entrepreneurs. They're running their own businesses as well. So this is something I've gravitated towards people who are interested in solving problems in this way. And I certainly have some mentors along the way. I'll name one in particular. Uh, was because I think it's relevant here. When I was in college, I had a professor. His name was Dr. Cornwall. He's retired now, but we co-wrote a thesis together, and the thesis was how effectively can you teach entrepreneurship? What are the factors? How do you teach this in an academic setting? And I won't bore you with all of the details, but what the ultimately was it helped me come to the conclusion that really it comes down to can you influence somebody's risk tolerance? And there are things you can do to get prepared to be an entrepreneur that can de-risk it for you, like having a mentor, like being in a cohort or being in an accelerator that can provide some structure. So looking at and for some of these communities or systems is what I spent a lot of time doing. And I think shout out to Dr. Cornwall if you ever hear this, but
Yeah, that's
he
great.
helped me he helped me recognize that if you pursue some of these things that can help de-risk it,
Mhm.
you can ultimately increases your chances of being successful.
Yeah, yeah. I love working with startups, new veterinary hospitals, and for me, it's so much fun to kind of help them start a year before they unlock the door. And we're starting with mission,
Yep.
vision, and values, and getting that foundation laid, and helping them with their marketing and who their brand is, and like who they are. Um,
Yeah.
but it and I talk to other people too, and they're like, yeah, after you get 5 years out they've kind of made a mess of things and you're trying to go in and fix the mess. So starting right and having that mentorship or having a coach or having um,
Yeah.
a cohort of people who have been there and done that, and you learn from other people's mistakes. I once told my husband, because I'm an avid reader, if you could see behind me, there are like way too many books, but and I found out you could put 2,500 books on a Nook, I had to have one. But you learn by reading other people's mistakes and what not to do. And so you
Yeah.
can prepare yourself for things like, let's not do that. But
Yep.
emotional people are emotional and they tend to go in a lot of things in gut. Um, when I've talked to a lot of new practice owners and like, why did you want to do this? Well, I was working for somebody else. I thought they weren't doing it right. I thought I could do it better myself. And so I started a practice. Now, then they got into that and they said, now I realize why they were doing what they were doing
Yep.
because there were reasons financially that you just can't, do whatever you want to do. So I feel
Yep.
like there's a lot of that out in the world that there's a reality check sometimes from our dream to what's real.
No doubt. No
And
doubt.
yeah.
And that's where good that's where good at the end of the day we live in a relationship world, and
Mhm.
so that's that having good partners and good co-founders makes all the difference. I mean, when we're starting the company, I knew my co-founder's social security number by heart because I had to type it in so many times on all the forms. I couldn't even tell you my wife's at the moment, right? And it's just you really like you have to have this level of trust
Yeah.
with the folks, and you have to understand how to have really good, healthy conflict when you disagree. You have to
I know.
disagree really well, and ultimately come to decisions that are right for the business. But you just being able to share, be open and honest,
Mhm.
have the conflict you need to, and then get on the same page and move on is more than anything, that's the secret sauce of how to work with great teams.
Yeah. You know what, boy, did you hit the nail on the head there because sometimes I'll see practice partnerships and they never really decided what the rules were going to be before they got started. And then you're out there and you're in the weeds and
Yeah.
somebody's not pulling their weight or somebody's not doing what you think they should be doing. And you don't talk to them about it, but you just silently sit over there and stew. And
Yep.
then pretty soon it's become an extremely toxic situation. And so I feel
Problem. Hmm.
like getting lay the ground rules before you start, if, especially with partnerships, and decide who's going to do what, and then be able to come to each other and go, I really don't feel this is working out. Let's talk about this. Why? Let's be curious about this. Why do you feel like
Yeah.
we should do it this way? Why are you not doing these things? Because I thought we had agreed to do that, and just be curious and not accusatory, because then your partnership is going to dissolve and go down the toilet
Yes.
or
Yes.
possibly get,
Yeah, it's possible to assume positive intent and still have conflict.
yeah,
Those are things that are very possible, and they can coexist, and you can have healthy conflict and healthy relationships. Somebody told me once, another mentor of mine, really smart one, told me, until you have conflict with somebody, you're not actually in a relationship. You're just happen to be acquaintances.
yeah,
And I think with your co-founders particularly, you need to be in relationship, which means that first moment of conflict is like the best thing that can happen to your company,
yeah,
because the opportunity to get through it is going to be your secret sauce.
yeah.
You can either do this and you'll be a successful team, or you can't and you won't be a successful team.
Right.
I could point to that as probably the leading indicator more than anything else.
Have to weather the storm. I once read an article that said that was about an elderly couple, and they were celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary. And they said, "What is the secret to your longevity?" And they said, "Well, we've never had a fight." And I said, either they're the most boring people on earth or they're lying
Yeah,
through their teeth, because you
that's
don't
right.
live 60 years with somebody and not get mad at them about something.
No doubt. No doubt.
Oh man. So David, this has been great. So I just, what advice would you give to somebody who just really wants to create a positive change? Because something, I think one of the things that I like about Vet Verify is it's a helper tool, right? It is a
Yeah.
helper. And I think a lot of times people go into things really self-serving. Not to say that business isn't self-serving, but or it can't be self-serving. Well, when is that your primary motive? First of all, it kind of sucks to go to work every day.
Yep.
So, what advice would you give to somebody who says, I really want to create change in the world. I want to do better in the world. How do I get started?
Great question. I would say my personal advice would be, big things almost always start out as small things. So look around and solve a problem for somebody. Bonus if you felt the pain yourself. It gets a lot easier, frankly. In our story, we were frustrated pet owners that couldn't believe that we were porting around paper copies of vaccine records. And so we were just like, there's got to be a different way to do this.
Yeah.
If you have experienced the pain yourself, you are a step ahead. But even if that's not the case, do some rapid discovery. I remember I had a day job, before we jumped into Vet Verify. We were testing out if this was even a viable concept or not. And so at my day job, I would take lunch breaks, and from 2 months straight, would just book out my lunch breaks with just discovery calls, with folks like yourself or veterinarians, and just like, hey, can I grab 20 minutes of time? Can you tell me about this? Can I validate or invalidate that this is a problem? Before you jump in or before you invest $1, do that. It's free. Costs no one any dollars to go say, hey, can I jump on 20 phone calls to just validate, is this a pain point or not? And that's your first test in listening to the market. So if I was doing this again, I would start exactly that way. There's many things I've learned along the way, and maybe decisions that, in hindsight, I'd make differently. But the thing I would not do differently is doing some rapid discovery to validate the problem set before we jumped in, before we invested $1, before we had email addresses, any of that stuff. None of it matters.
Yep.
The first piece that matters is just validating the problem against the market. Is the timing right? Does somebody experience the pain? That costs you just a little bit of effort and no money.
When you were saying that, the Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank kept popping into my head, going, "You're solving a problem that doesn't exist. You got to make
That's
sure
right.
there's a problem, right? You got to make
Yeah, that's
it
right.
maybe bother you, but does it bother 99% of the world?
Yeah.
Because then it becomes a business. It's not just something that bothers you. So I feel like
Yes.
testing the market to see if it's if it's just an idea that you have, or if it's real, if it's somebody goes, yes, every day we have this problem. Yes, we talk to these people all the time. Yes, the
Yes.
clients are getting mad at us because we can't get them in and they want to go to the boarding facility. Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. No doubt.
Yeah. So this has been a wonderful conversation, really enlightening and entertaining. So thank you for taking the time
Of course.
to talk to me about this and to the audience about that. Anything you want to wrap up with? Favorite book, final words of wisdom? We will put your information and Vet Verify's information and how to get in contact with you in the show
Okay.
notes. People are interested
Cool.
in reaching out. Yeah.
I'd say final word of wisdom. I would just I practice what I preach. So if you're listening to this and you are an aspiring entrepreneur and you've got an idea or you're looking to validate that problem set, just reach out. Right. I think the one of the coolest things you can be is helping do somebody's discovery. It's also really fun to be somebody's first customer. And so, if you're out there and you're a practice manager, like embrace some of this, right? Be somebody's first customer. It's a lot of cool innovation. And often what they need is they just need 20 people to say yes to take them to the next phase.
Mhm.
So be one of the 20. Don't be one of the, the others
One
that'll
who's
say,
still using
oh,
paper charts.
yeah, don't be one of those. Yeah, be one of the 20.
Be one of the 20. I love that. Well, thank you very much, David, and thank you for spending time with us to the audience today. I hope you got some insightful information about entrepreneurship and the journey of a fairly new business in vet med that's now, I think, going to make a really wonderful change for certainly the front desk, but also for our customers. I mean, the idea here is to serve people well. And this
Yeah.
is just another act of service that we can do without really causing us any headaches, which is also
Yep.
a plus when we can serve people without a
Yep.
lot of pain and effort on our side. So thank you to the audience and thank you again to David. And I look forward to speaking to you again on the next episode of The Bent.